Having car problems? Well, with Rhoda, getting them fixed is as easy as ordering takeout. They'll come pick up your car for free, do any repair or maintenance needed, and return it right to your driveway. They'll even give you a complimentary video inspection of your car so you can see what needs to be done. Perfect for those of us that maybe aren't so car savvy. Book your appointment online at roda.com. And lucky for you, CityCast listeners get a 20% discount on any service for up to $100 off. Just use the code CityCast20.
Today on CityCast DC, there are not a lot of competitive races on your November D.C. ballot, but there is a very interesting referendum, and it could go either way. That is Initiative 83, which would bring ranked choice voting to the district. It would also open our Blue Cities primaries to independent voters. Brian Strege is one of the organizers of the initiative, and Dierdre Brown has been campaigning against it. They're both here to tell us why we should vote their way. Oh, and by the way, we are in the middle of our fall campaign. Thank you to those of you who have already made the leap to support our show, and if you haven't yet, we've got more information for you later in the show. Today is Wednesday, October 23rd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. So, Brian, you are part of the team asking for a change. What is it about the current voting structure that you think doesn't work?
So our view is that elections here in D.C. are currently broken, for lack of a better word. It's currently possible to get yourself a seat on the council by winning a very small percentage of the votes. We've got members on the council right now who were elected with 20 or 30% of the vote, sometimes in a primary, sometimes in the general for the independent seats. Part of this problem was somewhat self-inflicted. Because of the Fair Elections Matching Program, we've got more people running for council than ever, and we think that's a good thing. We want lots of candidates, lots of choices for our voters. However, that means that the field is likely to be split 5, 6, 7 ways. One time it was 23 ways, and candidates can win with far less than majority support. So we are the force behind Initiative 83, which would ensure that candidates win with actual majority support, and it would also expand the pool of potential voters so that whoever gets elected in the end will actually have a mandate to govern.
So, Dierdre, you've looked at these proposals, and you think we ought to stick with the status quo. Why is that?
I'm not necessarily saying we need to stick with the status quo. What we're saying is that I-83, ranked choice voting, and semi-closed primaries is not the fix. Like, we can't fix up the issues that we have with a bad electoral reform, right? Basically, ranked choice voting, they're saying that, make all votes count. Well, as it is today, all votes do count. But under ranked choice voting, if you read the legislation you can find on the Board of Elections website, on page 2 in the definition, it talks about how a ballot can become inactive. And it's basically if it's an overvote, undervote, or a skip vote. And if that happens, it says on page 4 that ballot becomes inactive and is not counted for any candidate. And they use the word any, A-N-Y. So under ranked choice voting in other states, we've seen and it's been shown that ranked choice voting does actually result in higher ballots being cast out, either because they come inactive or they come exhausted. It is shown to suppress the votes of people in marginalized communities. And so that's one of the reasons why we are asking people to vote no.
Can you specify which places these have happened in?
Yeah, so for example, a really good one actually that's happening right now in real time. There's only actually 2 states in the United States who have ranked choice voting statewide, and that's Maine and Alaska. In Alaska, they introduced it in 2020, and on the ballot right now in November, they have a bill to repeal that 2020 institution of ranked choice voting. And they cite high numbers of ballots that were, they call it spoiled. Our initiative calls it inactive. They said that during the state special at large congressional election, nearly 15,000 Alaskans had their ballots thrown out. And this included more than 11,000 tossed because voters selected only one candidate without ranking any other. They said this was 3 times the normal rate. So that's just one good example of what can happen under the ranked choice voting. Actually, less ballots are counted, not more.
I want to back up a little bit. Brian, I-83, which you're pushing, has 2 parts to it. Number one, it would open up primaries to voters who are registered as independents, who currently don't get to vote in primaries in D.C. And then as we've discussed, it would set up ranked choice voting, which is definitely the more confusing or novel part of it. Can you explain exactly how that would work? Because there's been a lot of talk about it being confusing.
Yeah, so basically this would just give voters more choices. Nobody has to rank if they don't want to. You're free to vote in a ranked choice system the same as you are now. If you choose to just vote for one person, you can do that. What Initiative 83 would do is it would give you essentially 5 choices, so 4 backup choices. So it's going to look like a Scantron test. There's going to be 5 columns. The first column is going to be your first choice, second column, second choice, and so on. We rank things every day. It's not a particularly complicated concept. And I think that the opposition likes to try to make it sound more complicated than it is, throwing terms out there like undervoting and overvoting as if they're new concepts to ranked choice voting, but they're not. All an overvote is you voted twice in the same column. You can just as easily overvote now, like in the primary between Bowser and Robert White. If you cast a vote and you filled in circles for both of them, that's not a valid vote. You voted for 2 people in a one-person race. That's an overvote now. So there aren't overly complicated things to ranked choice.
But can I just bring up something that Dierdre had raised, which is that there is data that purports to show that insofar as there are things you can do in this new system that will cause your ballot to not be counted. This is happening more often in marginalized communities than in wealthier, higher education communities, which seems to a lot of people kind of unfair. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would say, first of all, that that's not actually true. If you look at the New York City election, a lot of hay is made about the first race on the ballot, the mayoral race, having fewer rankings from minority communities. But if you look at other races there, such as the city council, there were actually higher rates of using your backup choices in New York. There's some other research going on at the University of Georgetown showing that it really does not hurt minority communities at all. And I think it's a little bit insulting to say that minority communities don't know how to rank things. People rank things every day. And even here in D.C., we rank things such as school lottery and things like that. So I don't think that our less fortunate members of D.C. will have a difficult time with this system. Most people who have used this system think it's easy. It's usually in the 80s and 90s in terms of percentages when they're asked.
Dierdre, I'm getting the sense you don't agree with that.
No, I don't. This is just malarkey here. So, yes, they always like to say that every day people use ranked choice voting. They always bring up the school system, which I laugh at. I'm a mother of 5. I have done the rankings for the schools, and I can tell you it is confusing, and you can make mistakes, and I have a JD, a Juris Doctorate, all right? But the difference is that if I make a mistake when I'm filling out the school choice form, my kid, they're not going to say, oh, well, your kid doesn't get to go to school. It doesn't count. They'll just let me go back in and fix it. There is no fixing your ballot once you have entered it or submitted it incorrectly. And studies do show, as you also commented, that there is a high instance of not being able to complete the ballot accurately in certain marginalized communities. The University of Minnesota concluded that, and this is a quote, ranked choice voting favors white voters and affluent who turned out at a higher rate, completed their ballots more accurately, and were more likely to use all the opportunities to rank their most preferred candidates compared to voters living in low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. But let's set that aside. Let's say we don't want to look at research that's been proven to show this. Let's just look at the data we have right here in the District of Columbia. You go to the Board of Elections website and you go back, this is recently as the July 2024 primary, and you look at the results by ward. At the very bottom, they do report out the undervoting and overvoting. And you'll see that in wards 7, 8, and 6 in particular, the numbers are much higher than you see in wards 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So this idea that overvoting, undervoting, or skip voting does not affect certain neighborhoods or certain communities is not true. It's shown in the data we already have. And this is ranked choice voting is just going to exacerbate that issue.
So if I could just respond to that about Ward 7 and 8 in terms of undervoting, where that data is coming from is primarily our at-large races where 2 candidates are elected at the same time. It's true that there's a higher rate of undervoting currently in Ward 7 and 8 in that they vote for one candidate instead of using both of their choices, and they're voting for the Democrat. But it is a mental leap being made that they don't know that they have another choice. Research actually shows that this is a strategic decision to only vote for the Democrat. So currently we have a partisan primary system. Initiative 83 would not change that. There's only one Democrat available to you. on the ballot for these at-large races, and people in Ward 7 and 8 are simply voting for that candidate and not using their second choice. And strategically, if all you care about is that the Democrat makes it onto the council, that's the right choice.
When BOE reports out, if you go to the website, undervoting, they don't report which race it was for. So once again, that's a leap. But we do know it's a problem, and it has been a consistent problem.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun. But with Christopher Nace and the trial lawyers at Paulson and Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson and Nace is a D.C. law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the D.C. community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates, Samantha Peters, John Reese, and Maya Perry, handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson and Nace has even been recognized as one of Best Lawyers' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson and Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com or call 202-463-1999. Say goodbye to rent. Kite House, one of DC's best-selling condominiums, has an exciting new announcement. You can now own with no money down, thanks to a grant program to assist qualified buyers purchasing at Kite House. In addition to no money down, Kite House is offering interest rates buy-downs and new pricing. Kite House is part of the Parks at Walter Reed. It's a super walkable neighborhood with a Whole Foods, nail salon, and charmery, plus year-round festivals, markets, and exercise classes. One-bedroom pricing starts in the high 300,000s. 2 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms plus den are also available. There's an open house every Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 4. Visit www.kitehousedc.com/incentives for more information or to schedule your tour.
Hey, Andy McDaniel here. I'm Chief Creative Officer at CityCast, which means that not only have I been a part of creating the podcast that you hear every day, I've gotten to be a part of starting 12 other CityCast podcasts around the country that each sound totally different from this one. Now, it would make more business sense to make one podcast that we just published everywhere, but that is not what CityCast is about. CityCast is a national network of local podcasts. The team that you hear every day lives here, loves this city, and works so hard to reflect the issues that matter most to your future. But making a unique local show only works if local listeners like you show up to support it financially because it matters to you. That's why I'm asking you to become a member of your local CityCast. When you go to membership.citycast.fm and go through the super fast and easy few steps to become a member, it helps guarantee that we can make this show for as long as you need it. It's a relatively small act, but it has a huge impact on this show's future. Become a member of your local CityCast at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. And thank you.
Before we dive back in, I want to remind you that our fall membership campaign is happening right now. If you've been enjoying our show and want to help us keep bringing you the best of Washington, becoming a member is the best way to do it. It's true that our daily podcast and newsletter are completely free for anyone in our community, but that's only possible with membership support. Seriously, I show up here and yak a couple days a week, but the team behind the scenes work their butts off and need all the help they can get. So if they, and me, but if they have ever helped you understand a local issue, hosted a guest you loved hearing from, or introduced you to the best of what's happening around town, now's the time to show your support. I mean, let me just redirect it, Brian. You know, if there is more confusion about the kind of weirder little rules of the ballot or the more intricate details of the ballot in Ward 7 and 8 and 6, whether or not people should, quote unquote, understand, isn't this a thing to be concerned about given sort of historic inequities in our city?
I mean, I would say something far more concerning is the lack of a mandate that the leaders from Ward 7 and 8 are currently getting. In Ward 7, we just had a primary, a 10-way primary, where the winner in the Democratic primary was Wendell Felder, who got, I think, 26% of the vote. So he's going to get himself a seat on the council where 3/4 of the voters of Ward 7 did not vote for him. I don't think that's a very good system at all. And if you look at raw numbers, Ward 7 has 57,000 voters, and he only got about 2,900. So under our current system, you don't really need to get that many votes from your own constituents to actually get yourself a seat on the council. And Initiative 83 is about letting more people vote and giving voters more choices. That's it.
So, Dierdre, let me ask that of you. We do have this system in DC where you wind up with these crazy primaries where there's like 26 people and someone could get like 9% of the vote and win. I don't think anyone thinks that's a great outcome. This is well-intentioned, I think, effort to fix it. Why not give it a try?
Yeah, so I noticed Brian didn't answer your original question was, should we be concerned? The answer is yes, we most certainly should be concerned. And then he went on to quote, there's 57,000 registered voters in Ward 7, but Wendell Felder only got 2,000. What he didn't tell you is that a very small percentage of the 57,000 actually voted, right? He implied there was 57,000 people who showed up. We have a low voter turnout. Ranked choice voting is not going to stop that. There are systematic issues why people do not vote. When we start talking about, let's use the Ward 7 race, where we had 10 candidates who were running, Wendell Felder won with about 22% of the votes, right? Of the people who actually voted, not of everyone who's registered to vote. And here's my answer to that. As Brian mentioned in his intro, a couple of years ago, we as a city decided we wanted to implement fair election with the intent of leveling the playing field so that more people could run for office without having the barrier of having to have, donors with deep pockets, right? So you would cap how much money a candidate could raise per person, and then the seated city would match it by 5. That was the intent. I argue that we need to fix fair elections. There's some tweaking that need to be done if you want to fix that, but it's doing exactly what it was intended to do, was to allow more people to be able to run by removing the barrier of money. And by doing that, this is why we have this 10 people running for a race and one person winning with 22%. Ranked choice voting and semi-closed primaries is not going to fix that problem. We cannot replace the electoral reform that needs to be fixed with bad electoral reform. That's not the answer.
But in that Ward 7 election, so stipulated, a very small number of people voted. But even of that very small number of people who voted, the great majority of them didn't vote for the person who is almost certain to become their council member.
Right. And so if we want to say that we want less people to run, then we can do that. There's ways to fix the fair election, to put it back, or maybe to come to some medium. I also want to bring up this one issue, and it's difficult to do on the radio, but if you go to our website, voteno83.com, on the main page is a presentation, and halfway through, you'll see a slide where we show the 2023 Arlington County primary board, where they use ranked choice voting. And what you notice is that as they're going through, they went through 7 rounds to get down to 2 candidates. And as they did that, you'll notice that, like, for example, someone who was, for example, one lady actually had the lead in rounds 1, 2, and 3, but she ended up not winning at all. Or the person who ended up winning would have really have come in 4th. And so one of the biggest concerns with ranked choice voting is that although they're saying you're going to have someone who has the most votes, it's a false majority, because it's as you go through the rounds of tabulations, people are eliminated and their votes are recalculated to other folks. But so it's not necessarily who the majority wanted. And this is one of those examples where the votes can be manipulated so that someone who's on the front, someone who would never have won to begin with, actually ends up being the victor at the end. So that's something to really be concerned about.
Brian, what do you make of that?
Yeah, a couple things there. One, I don't think that it's a bad thing that we have so many candidates running. I'm a little surprised to hear the suggestion that maybe we would want fewer candidates running. We just need to upgrade our electoral system so that it can handle multiple candidates better. 10 people running is great. It would just be better if we had a system where you got 50% instead of 26 to win. And on the Arlington County example, I'm glad you brought that up, because we've seen, obviously this is a podcast, but we've seen the No 183 slide deck where they bring up this Arlington County example. And it's completely unrelated to the way Initiative 83 calculates the winners for the 2-seat races. Arlington County uses what's called a single transferable vote system, where you have to get a threshold. And I'll go ahead and agree with Dierdre. It does look a little strange where one person reaches the threshold and then is taken out of the counting. That is not how I-83 handles the 2-seat races. I-83 would simply let the winner and the runner-up win in a ranked choice voting election, the same way it happens now. The winner and the runner-up get seats.
So that's a little needed as well, because he's narrowing that down to the 2-seat races. What he's not telling you that if under ranked choice voting in every other race, like we were just talking about, a Ward 7 race where you get one person, people are eliminated as we go through the tabulations of the rounds. So I just want to be clear that does happen under their proposed law.
Yes, if nobody gets a majority, then the last place candidate is eliminated. Yes, that's how ranked choice works.
I think that there are fairly different ideas on both of you guys' parts about how this would change politics in D.C. if it works the way you think it's going to work. Can you guys, I'd like you to both to lay out like what you think is how it will change our politics. Brian, why don't you start?
Yeah, I could give you a little bit of an example. So when I'm not wearing this campaign hat, I'm also a ANC commissioner here in Navy Yard. We're newly redistricted into Ward 8. And without getting too deeply into the Ward 8 politics of Trayon White, I can tell you that even before the bribery scandal, there was not a lot of love for Trayon White here in the Navy Yard section of Ward 8. And when the primary rolled around, I talked to a lot of voters, and they were very demoralized by the fact that Trayon had multiple opponents. They saw that 2 people were going to run. Originally, it was 3, but Marcus Batchelor dropped out. But 2 remained, and it stayed that way. And people thought, well, Trayon's going to get reelected easy because the 2 people are going to split the anti-Trayon vote and he's going to coast to reelection. That's exactly what happened. No incumbent should be happy that they drew 2 opponents instead of 1. And to his credit, Trayon did get above 50%. We got 52%. But in a ranked choice world, that would have been a much closer race. It seems as though there was a 48% anti-Trayon vote. Maybe there would have been higher turnout because people would have seen it as an actual race instead of a non-event. And I think that situations like that would repeat themselves all over the city. It's very difficult to want to seat an incumbent. If you look at Anita Bonds, she's the master of getting reelected with 35% of the vote because she always runs in a split field. Split field should not be a guarantee to incumbency reelection, and right now it seems like it is.
You're saying it would mean incumbents in general get reelected less, or that in some places people have claimed this would lead to less extremist, more moderate candidates winning. Is there sort of a big picture of how it would change the politics as in your point of view?
Yeah, well, what we like to say is make politicians work harder, right? So obviously people would have to campaign differently, and it would be a good thing. Maybe incumbents would learn and they wouldn't have to they wouldn't choose to just cater to their base. They would actually have to expand their messaging, and it would be a good thing for them as well. It's also been shown to just result in, I don't want to say friendlier, but more constructive campaigns where if you're not somebody's first choice, you can at least campaign for their second choice on the ballot.
So there's less incentive to tear people down. But Dierdre, let me ask you, you obviously think it's going to work very differently than what Brian is laying out. So if it works the way you think it's going to work, how do you think it'll change our politics?
Yeah, so he used the Trayon White and then said Trayon White got 52% of the vote. So even though he's saying his constituents didn't like Trayon White, apparently 52% of the Ward 8 voters did. So if that worked exactly how it would have, and ranked choice voting would not have worked in that scenario, because ranked choice voting only kicks in when you have more than 2 candidates, and on the first round, the person doesn't get over 50%. So he would not ranked choice voting wouldn't have kicked in there. He still would have won, is the point I'm making.
Well, but somebody, I guess in theory, could have said it's easier to take on an incumbent. I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. It might have changed who was interested in the race, I assume.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it would have. Once again, this is why we have the fair elections, so that people can run against incumbents. And when you see a incumbent win, is mostly because the person who ran against them, unfortunately, wasn't able to convince the voters that they were better than who was sitting in the seat, right? So that's the issue. It has less to do with ranked choice voting and more to do about who we're running against these incumbents. Because I agree, some of our incumbents don't need to be in office and shouldn't be in the Wilson building. But here's what we think and what we know. We believe that ranked choice voting is going to change significantly and could change significantly who's sitting in the Wilson building and who's sitting in the executive office. And we believe that is on purpose, right? That they keep saying that we're change. What are you changing from? If you look at our executive office, if you look at our Wilson building, we have a long history of having women and people of color. So all we can assume is that they're trying to reverse the progress we've made in making our elected officials diverse and representative of our city.
So you're saying this is a scheme to make the council and mayor less representative of Black and brown communities and women in D.C.
Oh, 100%. Like when you keep screaming about change, what are we changing to? They'll even sometimes say, oh, look in New York, it brought in more women. On their website, it actually says this will help with women and people of color being elected. Okay, but that's not a problem we have here in the district.
Brian, that's a fairly heavy charge. Do you want to respond to that?
I mean, yeah, we would push back on that very hard. Ranked choice voting throughout the country has been shown to do just the opposite. In Oakland, where there's a declining Black population, it actually, when they instituted ranked choice voting, the Black representation on their city council went up. First majority person of color city councils in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Salt Lake City. It does not harm minority representation at all. It has been shown to do the opposite. I'll give you that we do not have that problem currently in D.C. We have a very diverse council, but to say that this is going to somehow make it worse is not backed up by the data. I've heard this referred to as gentrifying the vote. That is not what this is doing.
Well, and then the other part of that, what I was saying earlier, I would laugh when they hear them say, make politicians work harder. I can tell you, as someone who's ran a council race, if you're a candidate, you are working hard and you are talking to everyone. When you're standing down at the farmer's market, no one has a little tag on their shirt that says, how they vote or who they are, what party even working for. I mean, I've talked to people and they later go, I said, can you sign my petition? And they go, oh, I live in Maryland, right? So you're out there talking to everyone. You're going to every forum, every debate you can go to, standing on the corners of the grocery stores. So this has nothing to do about making politicians work harder. Once again, if you feel that the politicians we currently have in the Wilson building or at the executive office are not meeting your needs, then the answer is to run better people. Get them out of there. But this is not the answer to it.
So let me ask you both about the other element of I-83, which is semi-open primaries. That is to say, if you are an independent in D.C., which is an overwhelmingly Democratic city, up to now you have felt like basically your vote doesn't count because you don't get to vote in the primary. You now will be allowed to vote in one party's primary. You could vote at the Democratic primary, the statehood primary, or the Republican primary. But Dierdre, what are your concerns about this?
So it's pretty simple. We need to remind people that primary elections here in the district are nomination elections. It's when the Democratic Party, Republican Party, and the Green Party get to pick the candidate that represents their values and their platform to represent them in the general election in November. In the District of Columbia, if you're not registered with one of those three parties, you're considered unaffiliated or an independent. And in that case, you cannot vote in those elections because you're not a member of the party. Now, this is under the Home Rule Act, which says that our primaries are partisan. We believe that if you want to vote in the primary election, then you should join one of the parties. And then just to be clear, you can mail in and change your party affiliation up to 21 days before the election, or you can walk into any polling place in the District of Columbia on the day of election and change your party. So as with any other association that you belong to, if you're not a member, you don't get to vote in their elections. It's really that simple.
Brian, she is saying like this is about freedom of association, which is a sort of basic American value. Why is the current system bad enough that you would want to sort of go against that argument?
So I think you need to, first of all, put yourself in the shoes of a voter in D.C. who might want to be registered as an independent. There are plenty of reasons why people in D.C. register as independents. Voter registration is public record, so plenty of residents here have jobs where the appearance of impartiality is important, like journalists, public employees, judges, things like that. And those voters, we think, should still be allowed to participate in the most important election in D.C., which is our primary. And if the Democratic Party truly wants to be a private club restricting access to those wearing its label, then they should go ahead and pay for their own primaries. These are taxpayer-funded primaries. And by the way, Republicans did that this year. They had a presidential primary out of a hotel. So it can be done if a party really wants to restrict its access. They can pay for it themselves. But as long as independents are footing the bill for the primaries, they should be able to vote in them.
But why did you guys lump these two proposals together in one initiative?
In my opinion, these two proposals belong together. They both do the same thing in that they require elected officials to get more votes. So we like to say, in terms of something like the Wendell Felder race, where he got 2,900 votes to win, you're getting a fraction of a fraction to win. So ranked choice voting obviously brings the voting threshold up from 20, 30% sometimes to 50%. Opening our primaries to independents will do the same thing. It's expanding the voter pool. So instead of the only 76% of registered Democrats, their potential pool will go up to 93%. Independents will be allowed to vote in the Democratic primaries if they so choose. So they move in the same direction. They require politicians to get more votes, which will make them work harder in office. They got more people to worry about, more constituents.
Let me ask you different. Is there anything about the current system you'd preserve?
We do preserve the partisan structure. So the Home Rule Act does require for party primaries to be held on a partisan basis, which Initiative 83 does. There's a lot of talk that somehow this is in violation of the Home Rule Act. It is absolutely not. And if it were, we wouldn't have gotten this far. We would not have gotten through the proper subject matter hearing last year. But we are keeping the current partisan primary structure intact. There will still be a Democratic primary resulting in a Democratic nominee. There will still be a Republican primary, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not changing that.
Dierdre, let me ask you the same question the other way. Is there anything about the current system you'd like to blow up?
Not to blow up, but we do think there should be some election reform. But before I get to that, I just want to touch on the proper subject matter. So back a whole year ago, 2023, they originally put in this measure. The measure was shown to appropriate funds, which is a no-no. You cannot have an initiative on the ballot that appropriates funds. They got an opinion letter from the Attorney General's office that said if they added the sentence that you see on your ballot that says subject to appropriation by the council, that they could then move forward. And so they withdrew their initiative and put it back in with that one sentence. That is being challenged, not by me, by another organization. So the idea that this is all kosher, it not necessarily is. What we're saying, how they're violating the Home Rule Act, is that they're circumventing it, right? They're playing with words. They're saying that it's still partisan, but we're going to let unaffiliated people vote in one of the three primaries. Most likely, you can hear he only talks about the Democratic primary. We have three parties here because this is a direct attack on trying to, once again, change who is in our office, who's being elected. Just because independents vote does not mean there's going to be more people. They're assuming that all 76,000 independents who are registered to vote are actually going to vote. Just like all Democrats don't vote, all 76,000 don't vote. But yes, we do believe that there should be some reform. Some of the things that we have thrown out and we have talked to council members about is expanding the council beyond the 13. We have talked about term limits. I'm a firm believer that we need term limits. And we believe that there should be some tweaking of the fair election legislation.
Well, you guys were about at time, but I just wanted to give you both, there might have been stuff I forgot to ask. Do you guys have any sort of last thoughts just as voters ponder their ballot and think about which way to go? Dierdre, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so the only other thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about is where the money's coming from. They've raised $464,000 according to the last Office of Campaign Finance reports. 82% of that has come from two organizations, Fair Action PAC, which is located in Silver Spring, Maryland. That is not D.C., by the way. And the other one is All God's Faith, Inc., Dr. Bronner, who's in California. According to their finance reports, is coming from his California office. Only 3% of their funds will come from D.C. residents. Now, we've raised way less than that. We've raised less than $5,000. We're completely grassroots. We're volunteers. No one's being paid. But 100% of our money has come from D.C. residents and not from outside PACs. We're very concerned about these outside entities trying to reshape our electoral system. The main thing I would say to your listeners today is this. Get the facts. That's all we're asking you to do. Go to voteno83.com. Get the facts before you vote. You might go there and look at it and decide, you know what, I'm still going to vote yes, but we're hoping that you will see the reasons why you should vote no. So just get the facts before you vote. Thank you.
Brian, is there anything we forgot to hit today that you'd like to mention or other final thoughts?
Sure, yeah, I can respond to those two things and then give some final thoughts. So as far as our donors, I guess Dr. Bronner's, the soap company, is one of our large donors. While they're based in California, their social action team is based here in D.C., and Fair Vote Action is a national ranked choice voting advocacy group. We're happy to have their support. They're based in Silver Spring, Maryland, not super far away. Your treasurer, No 183, is also in Maryland, so I think we can agree Maryland's not too far. But I think for a while, the third largest donor was me. I don't know if that's still true, but We do have a lot of DC money in this campaign, and I believe we have 11 times the amount of donors as the no side. So it's pretty clear where the energy and activity is in this campaign. But what I would say to people is please flip your ballot over. Regardless of how you're going to vote, the question's on the back of the ballot. So please, we would like you to vote yes on 83. It's a simple upgrade to our elections. It's a proven system. It's about politicians working harder for our votes and being accountable to the majority of us.
Both of you, thank you for being here today. And I appreciate the thoughtful conversation. And one way or the other, please come back.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And a reminder that our fall campaign is underway. Become a CityCast DC member and get good feelings and great perks. Go to membership.citycast.fm right now to join. If you're already a member, thank you. We could not do this work without you. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.